I guess, hi everyone. My name's Emily. I'm one of the fourth years going into radiology, obviously, and staying here at MUSC. So we're going to get started with just a very short PowerPoint with some highlights about the interview process and the match. And then we should have about 8 fourth years here, and we'll have them introduce themselves after I'm done talking. And then it's just up to you guys to just ask questions. So can everybody see my screen? All right,
yeah,
perfect. I can't see the chat or anything, so you can just interrupt me if something happens. All right, so some general advice from the class of 2023 and the class of 2022, because that's where I stole this PowerPoint from and I adjusted it. All right. Okay, so general advice for people applying radiology or third years amongst y'all. So radiology, unfortunately, is getting more and more competitive. So
the context for that is about 2 years ago, my brother matched. It was like the mid 230s when the average would be the average score of a matched applicant. Last year it was 242. This year it feels like it would higher. We'll see what the data shows, but just to put some numbers on that.
Yeah, so the trends is also more and more people are applying into radiology. So you can kind of see here in this like slope in the bottom, which basically shows the number of applicants applying to radiology. And over the last 3 years, which it has been increased by like 10%, which is obviously a huge number. And over the last 2 or something, it's been kind of, a lot. So for those of you that are starting to get tired or, try and finish strong, trying to honor when you can. It's okay if you don't, but it helps for small things help. So letters of recommendation. I'm trying to think. I think I asked them to kind of throughout third year, but really, I'm getting some feedback. Is that you, Dante?
No, they're muted. You're good.
Okay, thank you. Solidified it over the upcoming summer. So if you can get like a radiology rotation in the summer and get a letter of recommendation if you don't have any radiology letters yet or people that could write for you. I think a couple of people on the panel did that, so we can talk about that later. Get a professional headshot. They'll email you about that at some points. Then try and study hard for step 2, since most of you guys, I don't think will have a step 1 score. Step 2 is going to get more and more important, and they will look at those scores. However, I do wanted to say that some schools are starting to do some like double-blinded types of interviews. At least I had that experience with that. What that meant is that they had some interviewers did not see my application, and they told me so whenever I talked to them. So some of them, they are trying to diversify. If you're not a good step taker, it's not the end of the world, but try to do as good as you can. So for your personal statement, you'll start really drafting that, soon, probably June and then over the summer. I highly recommend going to the CAE. They did an awesome job helping me write a really strong personal statement, and those appointments fill up relatively quickly. So I would try and, start it early. You kind of have to have it ready by September. But I thought it was helpful too to give my personal statement to my letter writers to be like, hey, you told me that you would write a letter for me months ago. Here's my statement. Here's my CV, just to kind of, put things in perspective. Regarding competitiveness, I know it's kind of hard for some of you guys since you don't really have a step score yet, and you only can base your competitiveness on honors and like pre-clin work. But I would talk to Dr. Hill. She'll tell you, and she has a lot of experience now, also with this new system, and talk to Dr. Stalkup, who's our new program director this year for radiology, and see which parts of your application you can work on. I actually had a meeting with him just generally in third year, just be like, hey, I'm applying radiology, just introducing myself and see like, this is kind of my background. Anything you wanted to add to that?
For context, for those of you that don't know, Dr. Stallcup is the program director here. He was previously the assistant. Now he is actually the primary. Dr. Hill is with the College of Medicine, so you should be familiar with her as the Careers in Medicine. But she is a former program director for radiology at MUSC and for the residency. So they both have experience direct and being involved on kind of a lot of the different things. So even if you're not paired with Dr. Stallcup or Dr. Hill as your mentor kind of person in third year, there's a lot of value in like, meeting the PD once just to kind of put your name on or face on a name and also see what they have to think. And there's some more like there's a committee that will like do some more formal stuff when you're in the application period. But thing is, it's the earlier you can find out advice, the easier it is to make changes to your application. So it's good to know before things get too close to time to submit your application.
Great, thanks, Dante. So here is another thing, just kind of number-wise regarding matching into radiology. So to orient you guys, maybe you can just look at these kind of 3 rows at the bottom. Let's look at 2023. Can you guys see my mouse? I don't know, maybe. If not,
Nope.
Anyway, so if you see that bottom on the 2023 column, the 953 is the amount of people that matched into radiology, and 1,175 is the amount of people that applied to radiology. And this is from USMD seniors, which all of you should be at some point. And so that's an 81% match rate. And if you can see over the last few years, 10 years, or like in 2015, that was like 95% match rate, and it now is down to 81%. And most of that has to do with the number of applicants going up. And, you'll give you access to this PowerPoint as well. You can look at the numbers separately for IR and for DR, but just to reiterate that, it's getting a little bit more challenging. So ERAS is the website that you will use to kind of fill out all of your application information, kind of like your resume. For you guys, it'll open on, for the third years, it will open on September 6th. And on September 27th, it'll be sent to all the programs. So basically what you want is every single thing you can have it ready and in there by the time that the programs open it up, which would be the 27th of September. So start working on your resume, start, finding all of the volunteer experiences, everything you've done, and just kind of write it down somewhere. And then you can just plug and chug it into ERAS once it opens on September 6th. I looked it up. We have this thing called a supplemental ERAS application. Apparently, they're not doing that anymore next year, but they are incorporating the signaling and the geographic preferences in your application with just your general ERAS. And we can talk more about that with the other students, but signaling is where you kind of signal 5 or 6 or 7 schools. I don't know what the number is going to be for you guys. Like, hey, I really want to interview with you. It's kind of like a nudge. And then the geographic preferences are big regions that you can say, I want to stay in the Southeast. I want to go to the Pacific coast or something like that. And we can talk about that more about that in the panel. I assume interviews will still stay virtual, but we can also talk about these second looks that are starting to become more popular. That's just after the interview process. The school will say, hey, you can come and check out the school. Sometimes they do it after they already certified their rank list, and sometimes they don't. And I think they're trying to make that process a little bit more official as well. Apply broadly. So the NRMP, which is just like the matching society, the results of our match, kind of like, I think it's like what's the average step score, what's the amount of volunteer experiences, amount of research, whatever, all of that for our class will come out in July. In the meantime, you'll also get access to this website called Texas Star that allows you to explore what type of candidates certain schools accept an interview. And then this the Residency Explorer is another resource you can use. And then this virtual open houses and meet and greets starting around the summer. I think it was probably August or so. programs are starting to host these virtual meet and greets. I thought it was weird. The only way that you could really figure out about these was on Instagram and on Twitter. So I went and followed like the majority of the radiology programs out there that I was interested in, followed them on Instagram, and then as soon as they said like, hey, we're having an open house or something, just kind of logged on around August, September. Anything to add?
Can I
Anybody?
jump in real quick? Yeah,
Yeah,
real
of
quick
course.
with that. For IR open houses, the Society of Interventional Radiology (SIR) actually has a web page that on their, like a list on their web page that has all the contact information and like the links for those. So I have no social media, so I did not use any of that, but I would use that web page. I always suggest the open houses as well. There's a couple times I was like one of the few students I was in there. You get to ask a lot of questions. They realize that you're interested. I'm pretty sure I got a few interview invites from those as well. So I always suggest that.
Awesome. Thanks. Then just quickly, we're almost there. Just for the virtual interview process. This is a picture from somebody from last year. I would suggest trying to get in, start creating an area where you're going to interview, kind of have it be the same, and invest in a good light if you can. I bought like a $20 ring light off of like Amazon. I think it makes a difference on your face. Try and get like a whatever generic background and be comfortable, because you'll sit there for quite some time. I wrote notes on the computer, but just like start thinking about this a little bit, so you don't have like your unmade bed or just like kind of stuff behind you that you don't want them to see.
I will tell you now, that's way more critical than you would think about. It just feels like an afterthought in terms of like, oh, I got dressed and all the things, but it does make a difference having an appropriate environment to be doing the interview process in. And so it's definitely something to think about, because it's kind of like the equivalent of like showing up sloppily dressed if you have a terrible lighting and background and audio and stuff. It just does not make, it just can only hurt your first impression.
Yeah. So the outfit, business up top, party down low. As far as I know, I started off wearing my suit pants, and then eventually I transitioned into like PJs, and nobody ever asked me to stand up. So I think you can do that. I don't know.
There are
what the
horror
rest of
stories, maybe
Yeah.
IR, but not in diagnostic. Like that's classically
Yeah.
DR is pretty chill on the interview days.
No,
So
they don't
just-
do that for IR either. They don't do that. You'll be
Good.
just fine wearing whatever. It's all good.
I've only heard of like surgery programs doing that.
Okay, good. So lastly, it's just some general interview tips, and you'll hear a lot more about this throughout the second half of third year. Kind of practice interviews. I don't worry too much about the content of these interviews. I think you can ask everybody on this panel, but I talked about my hobbies a lot and about a lot of miscellaneous stuff, and really the majority of my interviews were just talking about just random stuff for like 10 to 15 minutes, and then maybe one serious question. I had very few interviews that were like, tell me about a time you failed. But then the time I did, like, try and be prepared for those questions. And then I kind of ranked some of those programs low when they did that to me. But anyway, MESC will organize, the radiology department will organize mock interviews. I would highly suggest you do those. And I think they were probably about August or September. That was really helpful. You'll get some good feedback. Regarding scheduling a fourth year, I'm sure a question will pop up about that in the panel as well. I did most of my interviews in protected time and when I was in the ICU, which the ICU allows you a lot of flexibility. And I also did a lot of interviews during a block called Rad Path, which is 100% virtual. So also a good block to schedule interviews in. And I'm sure some of the other fourth years can jump in on other blocks that allow a lot of flexibility. The emergency room does too. And then let's see. I guess scheduling is just through ERAS. I'm not sure. We can talk about really the tips. I would try to not do more than 2 or 3 in a week if you can. It gets really tiring.
Actually, this is something important as far as the scheduling interviews. The biggest thing to know about that is that when you get an email, if you have any sort of limitation on scheduling your interviews in terms of like you have time off or you have a lot going on at that time, the best thing you can do is get the email and open it and realize you have to respond to it and book a time as soon as possible, because spots fill up and it'll just be less flexible for you. So my recommendation is have 2 apps on your phone that can like refresh your email, and one of them's going to be faster than the other. That way you can actually respond to it fast enough to get one that doesn't suck for your schedule, because that will happen otherwise.
Yes, I kind of forgot about that painstaking process. Yes, try and have like either computer or phone or anything with you at all times when interviews are coming in, so you can do this quickly. Letters of interest.
Can I add something to that, Emily, real quick?
Of course, yeah, of course.
Yeah. I personally, my tactic with that, everybody, was to make a new Gmail account. You can change your email address on your egress application. So I just put like Nathan Residency or whatever it may be. And then you can have the Gmail app on your phone. You can silence basically every other notification, including other personal inboxes that you have. So you can add a unique notification just to an inbox. And I just made it a very obnoxious noise. And obviously being a procedural subspecialty, I was in the suite or I was in the OR a lot of times, then it would go off. And I would immediately know to scrub out and I'd go and check my computer. So highly suggest that tactic.
Yeah, that's a great point. Letters of interest. I guess if you didn't get an interview from some of the schools you're really excited about, don't hesitate after a few weeks or so to email a program and be like, hey, I was really interested, and I think that's fine. The interviews are very chill. Like I mentioned before, thank you notes. I sent out a few thank you notes, probably more, all virtual. I only sent emails, no handwritten thank you notes, more in the beginning of the season than in the end, because I was kind of tired of it. Not sure if it made a difference. Some programs said explicitly, please do not send us any emails, which was nice because then you felt like you didn't have to. And I'm sure some of the other fourth years can comment on some of these as well. And then letter of intent, I end up sending one email to my number one choice at the end of the season. But I think that's also kind of debatable. And then the last thing I have here are some helpful YouTube channels that you can just I did not look at any, I do not know, so I didn't look at any of these channels. What I did do is Reddit will post these spreadsheets up for every single specialty, and it kind of allows people to say like how many interviews they've gotten from which schools and at what dates, so you can kind of follow which schools have already invited people. I think I'd recommend not to get too crazy into these because obviously they're only a subset of the population and can be kind of toxic. But if you want to every once in a while kind of just look at these things, there's also a Discord channel about like pros and cons of certain interviews and stuff like that, and programs that you can look at. But most of all, I want you guys to enjoy your fourth year because it's great and much better than third year. And I wanted to, sorry if I kind of went through this, but we wanted to get to the panel, and I want you guys to ask as many questions as you can.
So I've got some, as following along, I just have some things that I think would be good topics just to have like out for the panel people to discuss, things they might just kind of like recommend. The first thing I would say right off the bat is that also this feels a little overwhelming. You will hear all this again. There's a lot of stuff you'll hear about this like as it gets closer to the time from the College of Medicine. Also, if you have a mentor through this interest group, rely on them for this stuff. They're really helpful for these kinds of things. If you don't have one and you want one, just let us know.
Am I still sharing my screen?
No.
Okay. All right. So if the panel can, hop on, just maybe put your camera on if you can. I don't know. So, and then maybe introduce yourself. Yeah. And then I'll be quiet.
I'm Nathan Leapart. I'm one of the fourth years. I matched an IR at UVA. I can't put my camera on right now because I'm driving. But yeah, so if you have any questions about IR, you can ask me or Anand. We are the two applicants that matched an IR this year.
I'm Anand. as Nathan just said, I matched into IR. I'm here at MUSC. So any specifics to that, I can also answer.
Shannon, I can't hear you. So you'll also find that there are going to be hiccups when you do your online interviews. Just stay calm. Try and figure it out. Try and have a
And then
stable
maybe you
internet
can go.
connection.
Yeah. I'm Landon. I matched here at MUSC for diagnostic, and I'm doing my TY year at Spartanburg. I think I applied to like 45-ish radiology programs, but like 70 total.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. Hey, I'm Allison. I also applied DR. I matched at VCU, and I'm doing my transitional year at Lexington Medical Center. And I did do 2 aways during my 4th year. So if anyone has questions about that, I don't mind answering that.
I can go. I'm Marissa, also went into diagnostic radiology. I matched at UVA, and I'm doing my transitional year actually with Allison at Lexington Medical.
Hey,
everyone. Sorry.
Sorry, I forgot. Go ahead, man.
Dante, you go.
No, please. I've talked enough already.
I'm Jackson. I also applied DR, and I matched at Yale, and I'm doing a prelim surgery year actually in Chicago. So happy to chat about that.
So I'm Dante. I'm applying. Good gosh. I matched into radiology. I'm going to Rutgers. So I would say that, in terms of things to think about, what's unique to each applicant is Jackson and I are applying. We applied to a region different than our home region, which is kind of a different ballgame than applying within your own region, unless you have really strong ties there. And then I think I saw Hannah in the chat. I don't know if that was a student or.
And hey, I'm one other DR guy. I matched at MUSC, and I'm doing my transitional year at Spartanburg as well. And I did not do any ways. And yeah, I'm excited for any questions.
All right. So if anybody has any questions, shoot. I don't know if that's Hannah or another Hannah student, but sorry if we missed anybody. You can put your questions in the chat, or you can just unmute.
So the reason why I keep bringing up Hannah is because Hannah was a couples match, which if you are interested in the couples match, that's its own separate beast. It's quite a tough thing to do. And you should find someone that's gone through couples match to ask questions, because it makes the tough process a little bit more different and challenging in its own way.
I can get started with the questions if that's okay. So I think the 3rd years right now, like the main focus is trying to apply to away rotations. You have any general advice for how you chose where you want to go for an away, other than just like I like the area, and anything that you did in particular to help your application to away rotations?
I can take that. I think Ashish is applying to IR, so probably me and Anand can answer his question best. So away rotations, I basically applied my kind of filter for them. Some of the applications can be a little ridiculous. Like I had some asking me for titers of certain vaccines, and I was like, no, that's not going to happen. So my selection for it was mostly within a region. And then unfortunately, some schools are like are off of the MUSC schedule. So mine also was I tried to tier it towards the schools that are on MUSC schedule. And then if not, you can try to use protected time to stagger it correctly. Some of them in the Southeast, unfortunately, are like 1 week off, which is very hard to try to work with protected time. But basically, I had made a region that I wanted to apply in. If the application seemed reasonable, it didn't take excessive amount of time, or they didn't make you pay money for it. Harvard, they'll make you pay $100 just to apply, which is stupid. So like, it's just kind of a lot of selection like that. My mentality was like, which were the easier ones to apply to? Is it within my region? Is it a good school? And then when I applied to them, basically, the first two that came back to me were good schools. I was like, I could see myself going there for a month. And so I accepted them, and I withdrew my application from the other ones just because I didn't want to like waste their time. But it's very common for you to cancel or withdraw these applications. It's not going to put a stain on you. If you want to go somewhere else and you get acceptances from local ones, choose the ones you want.
Daddy?
Emily.
Oh, sorry, but was I unmuted? I'm talking about my dog. Just so you know.
Wait, can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Just along with Nathan's point, I think another thing to think about is your schedule in terms of how many aways do you want to do. And when you guys are applying to these aways, you'll get certain dates that, like Nathan kind of alluded to, but these dates can either run in line with MUC or not, like he said. But I think the more important factor is which schools are you going to prioritize, and based on those schools you're going to prioritize, you have to organize your dates a certain way. So if you have two schools that you really want to go to for 2 aways, I wouldn't stagger them based on only the same dates. Try to apply for them different dates so that if you get both of them, coincidentally, then you have availability for both of them. Now, obviously, there's no guarantee that you get those schools, but I also think it's important to understand which schools you're willing to burn and which schools you're willing to accept over others. And on that same mentality, always send the follow-up emails, especially if they've already accepted you. It's very important to let them know that, you know, due to whatever reason, you can't accept their invitation, no matter how much you wanted to go there. You know, if you have to fudge it a little bit in certain words and the way you word it, I think it's important to maintain that bridge and that connection just for the applications, because I think we can all attest aways are a huge deal and they impact your application and your chances. But at the end of the day, it doesn't guarantee you get in there. And so it's always important to, you know, foster those relationships, even if you don't do an away there.
And I'll add a comment for the people that are applying to the diagnostic radiology spots. Aways aren't like really necessary if you're just applying DR. They can be helpful if you have like a specific location or program that you're interested in, want to check out. But really, they're more helpful for like DO students or like people that don't have like a radiology residency at their home institution, or if you just want to do more radiology rotations during your fourth year, which is fine. But you know, I didn't do one, and a lot of people don't either.
It's a great way to travel if you're interested in going somewhere, and if you're applying to a different region, it can also be really helpful. But you know, Allison would be the person to ask about that, what she thought of doing aways.
Yeah, I'll speak on kind of my experience. So I initially was not planning on doing an away in my fourth year. When I met with one of my advisors, he was like, it can't hurt to do one if you're interested. And at the time I was a little undecided. But then I was like, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do it. And if I'm going to do one, I'm going to go ahead and do two and just kind of use it as like a chance to get to see different programs. Cause obviously like had rotated through MUSC's program, but I was really interested in seeing what other programs were like. And also just a chance to travel in my fourth year and to kind of like get to see something new. I really enjoyed my away rotations. I think it was like a really good experience. I ended up matching at one of the places I did my away rotations at. So I would say it was helpful there. I'll say like a few things like, one, don't procrastinate if you are interested. I definitely procrastinated a bit and missed some deadlines. And it is what it is. Like it still worked out, but just to try to kind of get your things in order so that way if you are interested in doing away rotations, you can get that in. Get your vaccination info together because pretty much every rotation is going to want all of that information. It's just like another thing to get done. Another thing too was that to look up scholarships. Some away rotations do offer scholarships that help cover room and board, particularly if you're a URM student, and it's worth checking it out. And also to there was one more thing. Oh, if you like for this year for ERAS, the supplemental application required signaling. It's not the same for each school, so you should definitely reach out to the place that you do an away rotation at. But a lot of places that you do an away rotation at, you don't have to use a signal for, because they basically are like, we already know you're interested there. So for me, it was kind of nice because I think both places that I did away rotations that didn't require me to signal them. So it was just kind of something that was additionally helpful for my application.
And contextually, you only get so many of those. It's not a big number. Those are all very important. They're kind of like gold in terms of, the same institution that you signal will give you an interview versus not signaling will not give you an interview. That's critical because sometimes you don't know how much you like a program until you interview there, really see it, and you're like, oh crap, I almost didn't even signal or like strongly consider this institution. And so that freeing up to more potentially, secondaries or signals, can be really helpful, especially if you're applying in multiple regions.
Yeah, and I would echo what Allison said though. So like it is dependent upon the school. It sounds like both of her said you don't have to signal us. I had one that said you still need to signal us. I had one that said you do not need to signal us. So it's always good to ask the program directors. If you're on an away rotation, you should probably already set up a one-on-one meeting with the program director at said school so you can talk to them and like more directly express your interest in their program.
But also to like really highlight what Shannon put in the text as well is that if there is a location that like you were just totally dead set on being, you got to do an away there. Like if it's like, oh, my family's there and I really, really want to go to this institution, you got to, just because it really, really, it extends the interview time. It kind of like reduces the possibility that you accidentally give off the wrong vibe during like the one interview day when they have a whole rotation to kind of see that you're really interested.
I'll just add quickly on the away rotation note. I did an away rotation and I had a great time. It was an absolute blast, and I kind of focused on signaling, using that opportunity to signal that I was interested and willing to move out of the region, as Dante said. And I don't know, I would also advocate that this is kind of like one of the last times that you'll have complete freedom to go to a geographic differentiation. So you could also use it as just a fun opportunity to go live in a city for a month. I know that that's not kosher with the maybe talk of competitiveness, but I had a great time. It was a great month, and I would highly recommend if that's something you're interested in, not to totally reject that idea.
I think this leads into a great conversation in terms of like, so I'd love the applicants to kind of like talk about how they decided where they wanted to apply in terms of both how they chose programs and how they evaluated how like whether or not this was a reach for them or like, kind of things like that. So I can start, I guess, because I did that. That started the question. So I use Texas Star pretty heavily for it. Texas Star is great because it lets you filter by a lot of things. I also use a Residency Explorer, especially because I was applying. I knew I wanted to go to a region, but I didn't really know. I wasn't familiar with anything in that region really. And like no one here is really familiar in that region. So it's really tough. And so I really kind of just used that to do it. And then, but the thing you got to be careful about with these tools is that the limitation of them is that it's selection bias. It's all about who completes the surveys. And so, if you see a program that has one or two people like actually submitted their data for it, it's a toss up, whether it's the two most competitive applicants in the whole pool or, two people that are in the middle or vice versa. So just kind of be mindful of that pitfall. But for me, when I was trying to apply in that context, it was very like, region first, and then looking within that region is kind of how I kind of filtered things.
I mean, I applied mostly to programs in the Southeast, so just kind of pretty much went through the list in every state and applied to just about all of them in this region, and then like a handful of other like random places like in the West and Midwest and elsewhere. But what I did is I also like Dr. Hill was my advisor, so I pretty much just like had her go through my list and like let her tell me like, oh, this program is like a reach for you, or this you're competitive for this program, so on and so forth.
Dude, that's super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
I mostly selected based on region. I had kind of like a region in my mind that I was like, I will apply to schools here, and I'd like to be here. Both me and my fiance's family's in Columbia, so it would needed to be somewhere that has direct flights to like Charlotte or something like that. I chose for IR. You need to apply to both IR and DR programs. I would say usually that is the safe bet. I had schools that told me if you did not apply to their DR program, they would throw your application in the trash because it shows that you don't have interest in diagnostic radiology, which is a big red flag for IR. You spend 3 years with the DR, so you need to really appreciate that side of the field. So make sure you apply to both. I chose 40 schools. I applied to both their IR and DR programs. I did not apply to any regular diagnostic radiology programs that did not have integrated IR spots. Most places that have integrated IR spots have ESIR spots. So even if you don't match in their integrated spot, you can kind of circumvent that and go through ESIR and still become an interventional radiologist. So yeah, and kind of unique to IR when it comes to this is that most of your interview days, they're evaluating you for both IR and DR residency. You will interview with majorly IRs, but usually the APDs of the IR program is the PD of the DR program, so you will interview with them typically. So they are evaluating you for both. There are a few schools that is not true for, but I would say the vast majority interview you for both programs on the same day.
I can talk about the schools I picked. Similar to, I think, what a lot of people have said, I kind of had a regional bias for like the East Coast because my family is kind of scattered around the East. And then I applied to a few random programs like out West, but I also met with Dr. Hill and just like gave her my full list. And we went through like every single program, and some of them she was like the faculty sometimes have like an inside scoop of things that like you're not going to know about. Like, you don't know about the culture at a program if you've never been there. So it was helpful to meet with her for her to be like, oh, like that program has like kind of a bad reputation. Like, you don't want to go there. And she added a bunch of programs to my list that she was like, you would love it there. Like, I like research a lot. I actually interviewed at a lot of research track programs. I didn't end up going to one, but I considered them like during the application process. So she kind of knew which programs would be good for research. So if you're interested in research, definitely reach out to me.
I would also say that it's very helpful because they're going to know if there's a bias against students from other regions or if it's something that they like. And that's just one of those things that unless you're going to go through the residency list and see like who they have, when you're trying to evaluate, there's like 180 residencies. It's too big of a list to do that for. There's just kind of things like that you're not going to know unless you ask somebody who's been in the field, like Dr. Hill or Dr. Stalcup.
And I'll add to that, it was also helpful because the programs that like after interview season that I really liked and I wanted to like go see the cities if I hadn't been there, Dr. Hill like could so easily like recall prior MUSC students that went to those programs and like gave me their numbers, and like that allowed me to like reach out to programs that didn't have like a second look or they weren't offering like faculty tours of the program to just like connect with a resident. And I think like 3 of the schools that I toured, I got their information from Dr. Hill, and I interviewed with I toured with the resident that went to MUSC. So it also made it better to tour with someone that like came from the same school because you automatically have like things to talk about. You're not just like awkwardly walking around with a resident, but you can actually talk about things. And it was just like a really easy in. So definitely utilize Dr. Hill.
I would also highlight, I think is a great important point as well, is that like she's familiar with schools that kids go to. That also means those schools are familiar with MUSC, and that kind of plays into the interview season. I got interviews from programs that I know I only got interviews from them because they had really good experiences with MUSC graduates. And I dropped the ball by not sending them a signal. Like UAB, just has like, I think I saw just about everyone here at UAB. And it's a great program, and it's just they like MUSC kids. And so it's like, that you don't want to accidentally not include a school like that. So it's that just very much so recommend that. Talking to Dr. Hill or Stalka.
I would even go further than that. I cold emailed residents at certain programs I really, really wanted to go to. Duke tends to be pretty. Yeah, Duke tends to be pretty insular. I've kind of noticed from who they take. So I emailed their residents. I actually talked to one of them on the phone. Through their residents, I actually set up to go there and basically hang out with them for a morning and stuff like that. So even if there isn't an MUSC person there, I would just reach out and try to see if you can set one up. Obviously, if you've already interviewed there, you can reach out their PD or APD and see if you can set up a tour. But like residents tend to kind of help expedite things if you find one that you're friendly with or whatever it may be. But it's always easy to good to ask. It's kind of weird is like certain places they have kind of institutional policies that you can't come and see them or interact with them much after like interviewing with them. Like UNC they won't let you like come and interact with them face to face, but the Duke 20 minutes down the road will let you do that. So it's always good just on interview day just to ask if that is even a possibility and then pursue it if it is.
I think we have 15 minutes left, so I really want to cover these things. Oh my gosh, hobbies. I'm telling you guys, I did not realize we're going to be so important on the interview season. Like, if you have hobbies that you have maintained through medical school, power to you. If you're like me and don't, find the things that you do and find a way to describe them as a hobby. Because what you'll find is that people will use them as icebreakers and things to talk about. And honestly, I feel like is a great way to get to know somebody in terms of what they decide to use with their limited spare time and what that means to them. So if you think about it in that context, it's really important. So just be thoughtful about that. But also critically, don't put stuff you don't do, because when they ask you about it, it's a really bad look. So
yeah, I'll add to that. Like, I feel like for sure hobbies was like the question that I was always asked about. And when I was writing my hobbies, I was like, I don't do anything spectacular. I don't like mountain bike or rock climb or anything. So I literally put like stuff about my dog. I have a bearded dragon, so I put that. I collect house plants and I garden, and I swear like there was something picked about my hobbies that was spoke about in each interview. And even though it was like things, but like everyone has a pet, everyone, like a lot of people like houseplants, a lot of people like gardening, like there was always just something to talk about. So even if you think like, oh, this isn't something interesting or like something that people are going to care about, like I promise you there's going to be someone out there that finds it interesting, or they're going to want to talk about it and hear about like your experiences. So yeah, definitely it was an important question.
Also, if you have like any strange hobbies that are like interesting and like weird to people, definitely put those because they're really good talking points. Like I collect animal skulls from my old like research that I did, and I had that in there, and like every single interview, typically like multiple interviewers would be like, "Can you elaborate on that?" and like would ask a ton of questions, and it just like made for like a good conversation and like something interesting to talk about because I don't know, if you do something interesting, just put it.
you also have to remember your crowd. It's diagnostic radiology. These are the people that have like, some of them have a lot of hobbies outside of the norm. So.
And one person told me that collecting skulls is like off-putting and weird, and then you can kind of say that program didn't pass the vibe check and put them lower on your list. So.
Or sometimes, I mean, but it's like the thing is, again, it's like, you think about it when a residency is trying to figure out who to take for their program, who to invite. At that point in time, when you get to the interview, it is 100% is this personality going to match at this program? Because your biggest question is this person going to be happy with us? If they get here, they don't like us, they don't like the city, they don't like the program, they're not going to be happy, they're not going to stay, and this is going to be a drag on the program. So that's what it's all about at the end of the day. So
along the same or similar vein, a couple other common questions I got that weren't related to hobbies. I got asked a lot to describe a clinical encounter where I realized or saw how important radiology was to the patient comprehensive care. So I feel like having a good kind of like tag answer that you can always go to for that. I also got asked what I was most proud of on my application a lot. That was a common question. And I also got asked what I was most proud of that wasn't on my application. So I know that we've also clearly designated that hobbies are important, but I do think it's important to make sure that you're ready for the other questions that you could be asked.
I think that falls. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Josie.
Yeah, thanks, Dante. I was just going to add to that. I think ones that I were literally asked every single interview would be, tell me about yourself. I would say 50% of interviews started with that. Why radiology? What you want to do in the future, like in terms of radiology or not, and why you want to go to the program. And I think it's really important to have extremely solid answers for all of those. Basically, almost being able to recite those is, I just think it shows that you're dedicated to the field if you can recite why radiology well. And obviously, you need to be able to talk very fluidly about why the program. And I just remember when I was preparing for interviews, I thought I had to have answers for all these different random behavioral questions and all that. But really, I feel like if you just focused on those 4 questions, plus having a couple, one or two scenarios like Jackson talked about that you could tie into just about anything, that's a really good way to approach preparing for interviews, because it can be daunting to prepare for interviews, but really just focusing on those 4, I think, is immensely important.
As Dr. Stallcup put it, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I was just going to add one thing to these common questions. Write down 1 or 2 patient scenarios, just something that was meaningful for you, something that happened in 3rd year, a patient you really connected with, or something. And whatever that scenario might be that you'll be asked about in the interview, you can kind of always spin it into something that fits those stories. It doesn't have to be perfect, but you can kind of spin it that way. And I think that's, just having like 1 or 2 in your back pocket is important. Sorry, go ahead, Dante.
I was going to say, like, the thing is and I would totally agree with that you took the words out of my mouth. And I think that the other thing I would say is, like Dr. Stallcup said, there are softball questions that, like, everyone is going to have it. No one, maybe you're not going to get asked it, but like, they're going to view asking you that question as like kind of like the softball. And if you don't answer it kind of well, it's kind of like a low reward, high risk kind of thing. It's like, you don't have to have the best answer, but if you have a crappy answer, it's going to look super bad. And so just like the best way to prepare for those, I think I would agree with them, is like during the panel, you're going to meet with like a bunch of they're going to do mock interviews. Write down the questions they ask you. You will probably never hear them again, but having an answer that you've thought through for each of those questions will mean that it's kind of like practicing a speech in the mirror. When it comes game time, it just feels a lot more comfortable. So even if it's just that you look more comfortable giving a stupid answer, which is honestly sometimes all it takes.
I also
I would
want
say
to
another
add.
common question that.
Go
Sorry,
ahead, Nathan.
Another common question that I had as well was like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? I think that's kind of like their way of probing you, like what type of practice you might possibly think that you would want to do. I think especially with IR, like there's a lot of variability in practices. Like, you know, are you going to read diagnostic scans? Are you going to do a lot of peripheral artery disease? Are you going to do a lot of like liver directed therapy? So you don't have to be super specific, but I would say, you know, somewhat having a game plan of like what you might want to do with your life and what you might want to do with your practice is probably a good idea.
Yeah.
And I would say, especially extrapolate that to the region. If you know there are deficits in the region, like Southeast has terrible peripheral artery disease all over the place, probably get worse in the coming decades. So I commented a lot about how, like, you know, I would like to go to a program that has strong PAD work, and that I would like to bring that back to whatever practice I might join that I probably will end up in the Southeast. So just kind of knowing those factors whenever you answer that question is a good idea.
And I was just going to add another thing that I did before every interview was actually like reading about the program that I'm about to interview at and writing down questions, because inevitably every interview like kind of wraps up and there's like 2 minutes left and there's this awkward space and they're like, do you have any questions? And it's even more awkward if you're like, no, like we're just going to sit here in silence. So just like actually read about the program, like think about what you're interested in. Like I am really interested in MSK and I have done a lot of research and I'm probably going to do a lot of research in residency. So read about like research they like are known for at their program, or like resident involvement in research. And like literally on my computer on my like sticky note, I would have like 4 or 5 questions that I'm prepared to ask like throughout the interviews, just to like stimulate some more conversation at the end when they inevitably do ask you if you have questions.
To piggyback on that, in terms of there's a section on how to prepare for an interview day. That's 100% it. Have a list of things that you know you need to get answered and kind of follow along. I had like a checklist, and anytime anyone mentioned an answer to something, I would just put it next to there so that like come like rank list time, I had something to use to like have my thoughts organized. But at the very top of my list, I had general questions, which is like some boilerplate questions that would just like, you know, if you could change one thing about this program, what would it be? Something dumb like that, you know, which sometimes gives you a really good answer. And then specific questions, which is like specific to this institution, which shows that I thought about this program. Because, you know, if you get so many, it's like they think about you as an applicant, and it's kind of like nice to show the favorites that I thought about you guys as an institution too. I didn't just like wake up and come to this, you know, which you can do for some, but it's an opportunity to look good.
Just to piggyback on what Dante said too, on things to do on interview day, write down any single thought you have about the interview you just had. You will like thank yourself later when you're trying to make your rank list. If you thought a resident was weird or the vibe was off or whatever it is, just like make some detailed notes. Like what did they talk about? What did they ask you? And how are you feeling about it? Because eventually they will all blur together, and you need to have, you know, something to hold on to keep them separate, especially because they're virtual.
Yeah, I cannot stress that enough, taking notes. I literally have like my notebook still on my desk that I would just like start a new page for like every interview day and write down, because they do like a program overview in the beginning, typically like a PowerPoint from the PD going over like a lot of details you can't find online. Like sometimes like moonlighting, like how much it actually pays. Cause like they'll talk about like, oh, we have moonlighting opportunities, but like at the end of it, I'm like, everybody had moonlighting opportunities. Like, which one was better? Like, I wouldn't have remembered that. So, like, I wrote everything down. And, like, when I went to make my rank list, there were so many things that, like, I would be like, oh, I loved these 2 programs. Like, the vibe was awesome. Like, everybody was so nice. Like, but I don't really remember the details. And I would go look back and be like, oh, like, this one doesn't have independent call. They don't allow moonlighting. I'd be like, I'm going to rank that one lower than the, like, other one that had a similar vibe. So, take notes.
Because the big thing is that like you'll find that the top of the list and the bottom of the list are easy. Everything in the middle gets really tough. And it's like, you know, you think about it, a lot of people match a couple places down in their list. So it's like they're the hard ones, but it's also really important. And it's like, you know, a lot of them, it's like, oh, like for me, it's like they all check the boxes and everything. Now it's coming down to city and other like weird things. And it's like, then you go through your notes, you're like, oh, that's right. I did not get the best vibe from the program director. I thought that like I don't know if I would get along with them actually all that well. Well, that might be enough what points you towards one or over the other, which at the end of the day can be huge, you know.
I would say other questions that are important, mostly more for IR because it tends to be procedural and the service lines differ vastly in between different institutions. I had a standardized list, much like everybody else is saying, but I would also ask about particular service lines and also like whether diagnostic radiology subspecialties perform their own procedures. So at MUSC, IR does the vast majority of anything that involves sticking something inside of somebody else. But at other institutions, they, the abdominal imagers might do a lot more biopsying. That I was at one of my away rotations, they even did their own microwave ablations and things like that. So particularly for IR, I would ask about the big service lines, especially what their relationship is with vascular. If they don't have that particular service line that the IR should do, like what rotations can you do to fill that in? So a lot of times they'll say, oh, we send you on vascular to like go get peripheral artery disease work. One thing that I would say about that is my mentality is I always wanted to learn from an IR because I'm their resident. They're going to teach me. If I go and hang out with the vascular surgeons, I'm going to be second operator every time because they're going to put their resident in front of me. So that's just something to think about. Like I would say, make sure if you're looking at an IR program, make sure they're very well rounded in the service lines that they can do. Otherwise, you're going to have gaps in your training.
We totally didn't cover resident driven versus fellow driven. So quickly, a resident driven program is one where the residents do all the work. A fellow driven program would be somewhere that has a really strong fellowship that does all the reads on a certain topic. It can be plus or minus. Sometimes they are involved in teaching and it's really helpful to have somebody who's a great expert. But sometimes it's just they take all the volume in that thing away. And if like you're interested in that thing, it's like, it's great, you guys are good at this, but I don't see this until maybe I'm like at the last end of my residency, or I feel like I'll never get to read it because all of it's going to the fellows, so like that's kind of like that's something to think about when you're interviewing at programs is what volume am I going to be able to get to do as reading, and do they have that pathology at all? Like if you think you want to do peds, don't go somewhere that doesn't have a peds hospital affiliate with them for diagnostic radiology. Okay, well, in the interest of everyone's times, we are at the end. So please do reach out to any of the applicants or any of the panel. These guys match. They're really smart. It was really hard this year. This is the cream of the crop. And they're all really great people and would love to hear your questions. And then if you are interested in leadership in the interest group, we're going to be doing that soon. So please look out for your email. And as always, reach out to any of us if you have any questions. Everyone's super nice and helpful. And you can, on MUSC, you can find it. Well, our MUSC gets deactivated in a month, so don't wait too long. So, all right, thank you guys. And thank you so much to our panelists. We really appreciate you guys taking your time. Your busy fourth year post-match time. Everyone's at home except for me. So, thanks, guys.